This list may be a little bit different than some of the ones that you've seen before because I'm coming at it from a perspective of I had had no previous experience crocheting before I dove into the whole, crocheting plushies world. Hey, it's Tammy, Crafty Mompreneur. If you're new, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Today we're taking a little step back and talking about some things that I wish I knew as a brand new amigurumi, aka plushie maker. Now, a little bit of backstory. I do not have a background in crochet at all. Before I started making crochet plushies, I was exposed to crochet as a child, and then I never picked it up again. Like, it was not something that I ever wanted to do. And when my daughters started going to craft shows with me for another business and started coming back with all of these plushies that they were buying with the money we were making at the craft show, I decided that I needed to figure out how to make crochet plushies because I was gonna go broke. Being a crafty girl at heart, I knew that I could figure it out. So what prompted me to actually take the leap and start to crochet, it was when our little Chihuahua mix puppy passed away in December of 2022. And it was just a really super sad time. And I can say that I just used learning to crochet as a way to kind of manage my grief. This little dog was just like everything to our family. And granted, it wasn't our only dog. We actually had 3 dogs at the time. The 2 little Chihuahuas were sisters that we got for my 2 daughters. And then we have a yellow lab. And so it was one of the 2 Chihuahuas. She was just the most lovable little dog. And so it was really just like a sad time. And I think it was like the first time that either of my daughters kind of experienced like a real loss of like something like that. And so I took it upon myself that I was just going to learn to crochet. And I had remembered that my youngest daughter had gotten her some stuff to learn to crochet probably a year or 2 before, and then she never picked it up. It was just, she just didn't ever do anything with it. And so I went and raided her craft supplies and took it upon myself to figure out how to crochet. And the way that I did it was I just came to YouTube and started looking at all kinds of different tutorials and things of how to crochet. But I really didn't know the first thing about anything, really. I hadn't really ever been following anybody on Instagram that crocheted. Like, I just didn't have very much exposure to crochet prior to wanting to learn. I literally knew nothing, but I did know that I wanted my first crochet plushie to be kind of a memorial to our little Chihuahua mix puppy, which looking back now was not the best decision. So today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 or so things that I wish I knew as a very beginner crocheter of amigurumi. So let's get into the list. Now, number 1, I think is true for a lot of things, but especially if you are diving into the world of learning how to crochet plushies. And that is to always allow yourself to be a beginner. Now, let me say why I picked this as number 1. From my perspective, I'm someone who I am just gonna like figure something out. And like I mentioned in my little recap story, my very first plushie was going to be a Chihuahua dog. And so I just went to Etsy and I started, searching up patterns for dogs. I will link the pattern in the description, but this was the pattern. I knew nothing about anything, pattern, anything. And when I made the plushie, it didn't quite come out like the picture. When you are picking things to be your first crochet project, or as you are, starting out on your journey, my recommendation is going to be to look for patterns that are beginner friendly, no-sew or low-sew. Maybe even start with a ball, like my ball tutorial, or a little octo or something small to kind of get to know like the whole process of making a plushie. And so don't do what I did and think that you can just make anything. on your first big project, or even your first, month or so of crocheting. Because let me just share with you, first, I'll show you my very first crochet project, because I'm sure you guys are, if you haven't been around here a while, you probably haven't seen it. So my very first one obviously was like a little ball, but my first pattern that I bought and attempted to crochet was supposed to be a little Chihuahua dog. It is not little. It is not, it's way bigger than an actual Chihuahua. So this brings me to number 2. When you're getting started on your journey to creating amigurumi plushies, understand that the yarn and the hook size matters. Because here's the thing, is I really had no idea anything about yarn, hook sizes, like nothing. All I knew is that I didn't like working with this kind of yarn or any of the other yarns that I tried from my daughter's stash. This kind, I made the test head out of this old yarn, and this yarn was terrible. Like, it had like a string on it. This is not a good kind of yarn to learn on. And so when I decided on this pattern, first of all, I didn't really read the recommended supplies, because had I read the recommended supplies, this one says to use Yarn Art Dolce, 100 grams, 132 meters in a beige, or Himalayan Dolphin Baby. I was like, what are those? I don't even know. And then she tells you the hook size, the eyes, and then gives you the abbreviations, things like that. In the beginning of it, she says, please note, I don't give any crochet lessons or patterns. I was like, sure, no problem. Like, I'll just go to YouTube and I'll figure things out. And it says you need to have basic crochet skills to make this toy. Okay, skill level medium. I just went to Joann and was like, let's just find some yarn that works for the color that we want this toy to be. And that's how we ended up with this, because our puppy was like a beige color and then her ears were like a darker color. And so that's how we ended up picking blanket yarn. And yeah, so that's how we ended up here with this dog, because I didn't know any better. And then the other thing that kind of goes along with this is hook size. Now, when you're picking out your yarn and your hook size, the label on the yarn is going to give you a recommended hook size. And that's just what I used when I made this. And when you're making amigurumi or plushies, actually it's better to size down a hook size or two sometimes. Because this, I believe I used like what it said, and I think it said an 8 or a 10. I don't even know. I'd have to go back and look. But I used whatever the recommended hook size was, because I had no idea anything about it. And that's why we ended up with a lot of holes in the amigurumi, okay? And you can see the stuffing through that. And then as I've been crocheting now for 2 years and probably like 3 months, this is now how my stitches look with this same kind of yarn. And that's just simply because I'm using a 6.5 hook for this. And this was like an 8 or a 10, I think. So yes, hook size and yarn type matter. This was my second amigurumi, still not really understanding hook size. This one has all kinds of holes in it. See, you can like see all the holes because my stitches were not, it was not tight enough. Now I think I might want to make this the right way and see how it comes out. So I guess the bottom line is when you are picking patterns, make sure you follow the directions on the pattern of the recommended tools, the recommended yarn, the recommended all of those things, and understand that the more you increase the size of your hook and the yarn, the bigger your project is going to be. Now, number 3 on my list is of the things that I wish I would have known as a beginner. Probably going to be buying a lot of different patterns or coming up for free on Instagram or social media or on blogs. And when you do this, you don't have to print your patterns if you don't want to. You can utilize, if you have an iPad or an e-reader or something like that, you can just use your iPad. Now, why do I say this? Because when I first started, I was printing everything. If there was a pattern on Instagram, I would screenshot it and print it. If there was something on a blog, I would print it. And why, you ask? Because I would want to check off what row I was on so that I wouldn't lose my place. Well, that's really something you can do on your iPad. You can push the little pencil to write on. And there's even patterns out there now that are interactive. One thing I discovered within the last probably 7 or 8 months is things like GoodNotes and Notability, where you can actually use an Apple Pencil or an iPencil or whatever and write on the pattern. So utilize technology and don't be afraid of it, and you could save a tree or two. Number 4 on my list is to learn the basic terminology and then understand that every pattern designer is gonna have a little bit different way of writing out their patterns. There's really just some basic kind of stitches that you need to know to do amigurumi. And those are, it's a single crochet increase, a single crochet decrease, and then chaining and the magic ring. But what you're gonna find is that every pattern designer has kind of a little bit different way of saying the same thing or writing it out in a pattern. And so it takes just some practice and being exposed to some different pattern designers to get used to what you're doing. Let me just give you some examples. Okay, so I found one pattern here that says 8 SCNMR. So that's 8 single crochets in a magic ring. Another pattern that I have, it says magic ring plus 8 single crochets. So it's basically the same thing, but they have different ways of writing it. You'll also sometimes find 8 single crochets in magic circle. Magic circle and magic ring are the same. So I think just understanding that there's going to be a lot of different ways to say the same thing as you are going through and trying different patterns and, improving your skills as a amigurumi maker. And so just give yourself a little grace and you will definitely get better at reading patterns and understanding them. The next one is kind of one that I just kind of figured out as I was first learning, and that was that there is actually no one right way to hold your hook or your yarn as you're learning to crochet. What you'll find is that if you're scrolling on YouTube looking for someone that's going to teach you how to crochet, they're all going to hold their yarn and their hook just a little bit different. And so the key is to try a few different people's technique of, the magic ring or magic circle or whatever you want to call it, until you can find one that you get it and it works for you. And so don't beat yourself up if the first tutorial that you try, you can't figure out how to hold the hook. Try another one and see if there's somebody else who holds it maybe a little bit differently that you're able to get it. But whatever you do, just keep trying, because you will eventually get it if you keep it up and keep trying. A few amigurumi or plushie tips and tricks that I've learned that I wish I would have known sooner. The first being, when I was first starting, I was picking patterns that required quite a bit of sewing. And I didn't really understand that there was such a thing as low sew or no sew patterns, which are definitely more beginner friendly than having to sew on a head and arms and legs and a tail. And so I would say that my first, I don't know, 10 projects, required a bit of sewing. And when you're sewing on parts, if you pick patterns that are like that, one thing that I found to be a lifesaver for me is using like knitting needles or some sort of amigurumi sticks, but you can just get knitting needles at like the thrift store, and you can use the needle to hold the head onto the body as you're sewing it on. But you know, you just put them so that they hold the head from one side and the other, and then you could sew on the different parts. I did not know that early on, and I struggled with getting the heads on straight and making it look good. And had I known that early on, it would have been so much easier. Another tip that I have as it relates to amigurumi is safety eyes. Now, I buy almost all my safety eyes on Amazon, and I have them linked in my Amazon storefront. When you buy those on Amazon, sometimes the backs on those are really little itty bitty. What I do is I cut a piece of felt. I usually try and use like a same color felt, but I didn't have any pink. And cut just a little snippet, little tiny hole in the felt, put the eye through, and then put the back on. And I feel like that just keeps it, you know, more secure, you know, from trying, you know, you can't really pull that out. So like I pulled really hard on that, and I feel like it just makes it a lot more secure. So that is a tip that I learned. I don't even know where I learned it. I think I might have just saw it as I was scrolling Instagram one day. I don't even know. It definitely helps. I did one time say something about melting the backs, and I don't recommend that. Someone told me that that actually weakens the backing if you try some like melting this with. I don't do that. I don't know about putting hot glue on there, if that would make it any better. But I've found that just adding that extra little bit of felt makes me feel good that these eyes are not coming out. So I think a lot of people get started on making crochet plushies because they see like the really soft, velvety, like plushies that are really soft, right? The chenille. Not so much. I mean, I don't know how popular like using acrylic yarn is. I find this very hard to use. That's just me. I struggle with this so much. I personally prefer blanket yarn, but when I was starting out, I really wanted to use chenille yarn because it made the plushies so soft. And I will caution you, if you are using yarns like Parfait Chunky or Hobie, anything chenille, even some of the Michaels yarns that are chenille, you're going to have more of a struggle because this is what happens to the yarn. It sheds, making magic rings almost next to impossible to do. I did learn recently, someone in my comments reminded me of the trick to put a piece of acrylic yarn with the chenille yarn when you're making a magic ring to help you close it up. But that is definitely something that you can do. A kind of yarn that would be a little bit easier, I feel, to do a magic ring is something like this Naughty Ball yarn that doesn't shed. Now, I don't know now where you can get any other type of this yarn, because this is similar to what the Joann's Posh yarn was like, but it doesn't shed. And so it makes doing a magic ring much easier. There's also the Woobles kits, that kind of yarn in there doesn't shed, and some of the other like kits like that might have that kind of yarn. But I feel like being able to master the magic ring is really a key to starting on your amigurumi journey. And so I share in several of my tutorials how to do a magic ring. So I'm not really going to demonstrate it in this video, but understand that the kind of yarn that you use when you're first starting out makes a difference. Try and find a very beginner-friendly yarn when you're first learning, I guess is what I'm saying. Another thing that I will say that I wish I would have done sooner is find a community of other crocheters that you can either talk to, collaborate with, meet up with, who you can, bounce ideas off of, who you can, who gets you, okay? I felt like none of my circle of friends like crochet. While people support it and they think it's cool, like it's just not the same as like being able to understand my yarn addiction. So definitely like find a community of people who share that common interest. Other creators have community groups, Patreons, things like that. Even just reaching out and connecting with other people like in the comments of videos. I personally don't have a community yet. It is something that I'm looking to do later on. Right now, I found a community of aspiring pattern designers, the Naughty Hub, and it's by Naughty Pod, is the pattern designer. And when you join for a year, when you pay for a year in advance, you get the pattern for free. And then you get the whole community of other aspiring pattern designers who, you can show your crochet projects to. You can, learn if you want to learn to become a pattern designer. If you want to learn to use Canva, like there's lots of different information in this community group. And so it's something that I wish I would have found sooner. And I will link that information in the description box if you guys want to learn more about. My last tip is that if you're getting started on your crochet and your amigurumi journey, just have patience and keep practicing. I know that's cliche and all of that to say, but I really feel that like this is kind of an art form that no one is ever going to be great when you first get started. I mean, this was my first one. And then when I remade it about a year later, this was my next one. And even as I'm looking at this one, I now know more about face shaping. And so I know that I could probably shape her face a little bit and make her look even cuter. But I mean, come on. First one, second one. And maybe like on my 3rd anniversary, I will make a 3rd one and just kind of see the evolution of the more that you practice and the more things that you make, the better you will get. That's going to do it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it and you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe because Friday's video, we are going to be making a scrappy bear out of some patchwork yarn. So I hope that you'll tune in for that. And as always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next video. Bye. A crochet with plushies, that kind of thing. The master ring. Using a new yarn,